Good evening, and let's talk about firsts, because we're quite hung up on firsts as human beings. Firsts are important to us. Hence, two mitzvot in the Torah that really give importance to firsts. I'm referring to bikurim, first fruit. And I'm also referring to the Bechor. You can see the relation between the two words in Hebrew, the firstborn son, as well as firstborn animals in certain species that are consecrated, that are special. So to humans, firstborn are very important. The firstborn is the child that made us, into a parent. And there's something extremely important about that relationship that was created in that way. And I want to point out that is unique to humans. Why do I say that? Because from Hashem's perspective, that's not the case. When you think of the number of firstborns that were passed up for the younger sibling, starting with Abraham's children, Yitzchak over Ishmael, one generation. Yitzchak's children, Yaakov over Esav. Yaakov's children, the birthright is removed from Reuven, and it is now shared between Yehuda and Yosef. Think about the leadership of the Jewish people with the children of Yocheved, and Moshe is the youngest of the three, and he's the one who has been given the leadership. And this continues with King Saul, with King David, and their appointments and so forth. So Hashem emphasizes to us always that positions have got to be earned, not birthrights. And that if you want to rule and you want to be a leader, then it's going to have to be something that you've achieved, and not necessarily something that just happens to be because of your position in the family. But in terms of our human appreciation, it's the first that kind of really counts. And the parasha begins with the concept, the mitzvah of bikurim, which is the first fruit. There are lots of situations where we're required to give gifts to Hashem. We have the tithes and the terumah, which is given to the Kohen. We have the challah that is given from Ado. We have the sharings that are given to the Kohen. We have so many, gifts that have to be set aside from our income, and etc. But it doesn't have to be the first. But with this mitzvah of bikurim, the first fruit, it is specifically the first. And what is the lesson there? And I'm going to take this in two directions, because commentaries kind of find two themes here as to what this mitzvah is. And Rambam in Gather Perplexed, he develops the two reasons. He says there is the one, which is that it is to show recognition and thanksgiving to Hashem, and the other aspect is submission and humility, and that they work together. Because the first fruit are the result of our toil and our effort, and there's something very special about the produce that first comes out, and that's the very gift that has to be given to Hashem. So in those situations where there are tithes and gifts, the sequence, the order is not important when it appeared, but with the 7 species that Israel was blessed, it is specifically the bikurim, or the bechor, the first fruit that have to be given, because what's the message of the mitzvah? There's, of course, this huge concern that after Jews come into Israel and they conquer the land and they inhabit the land, they forget where it's all coming from. And you begin to imagine and you can transpose this into other situations of our own lives, you begin to imagine that your achievements are really your own, and that what you've accomplished in life is because of your um, business acumen, people skills, leadership skills, knowledge, quick, wit, and you manner with people, whatever it is. We all like to take credit for what we've achieved by saying this is a skill set that I have, that I've developed, and that's what has brought me to the achievements that I have. I'm a good farmer. I understand the land. I have patience. I know how to motivate my workers. What will the farmer say to explain why he's been very successful and he's got a beautiful crop? Yeah, he'll take credit for himself, and he'll use the words from the Torah, "Kochi v'otzem yadi." Aside it is my power and the strength of my hands that has created all of this beautiful achievements. So we have to somehow teach this person that that's not correct. And that's where Bikurim come in, which is both the acknowledgement that blessing comes from Hashem and the humility. So I think the best way to develop these themes is actually to look at the text in the beginning of our parasha, and we'll discover how this is all going to develop. Here we are, the Bikurim, which incidentally are not from all fruits, but from Israel's species. We can recognize them more, but I can see wheat and barley, and I can see grapes, and I can see olives, dates, and figs. And a pomegranate, of course. So I think they're all here. Here are the figs, and that must be where the dates. And olives must be somewhere there. It's not all of Israel's produce, it's specifically the 7 species. And this is how our parasha opens. This is how our parasha opens with the words Vehaya. And that's an interesting word, Vehaya, because this is a key word that opens up passages that is one of joy. Whenever we have Vehaya, we have Simcha, we have joy. And this is what Bikurim is about the celebration of the blessing that Hashem has given us. This is you come into the land. In effect, this mitzvah only came into being 14 years after the entry into the Holy Land. Took a long time to conquer all of the Canaanite tribes. It took a long time for all the Jews to settle, and it was only after those 14 years that the mitzvah came into being. So this is the Virishta, the 7 years of the inheritance, and then Yashaftaba, the conquest, Yashaftaba, for the 7 years which it took until the land was fully inhabited. And this is really the mitzvah. Well, you take from the first fruit from your land, put it in the basket, and you then go to Jerusalem. That's what's referred to as the Makom Shivcha Hashem, to the place that God chose. Well, obviously, it wasn't Jerusalem immediately, because for a long time, the Mishkan was resident in a place called Shiloh, north of Jerusalem. But that was then the place God had chosen, and then eventually it became Jerusalem. And this is where you bring the Bikurim. What do we find here? We find that it's Artzecha, it's your land, which is they've taken it away in the English translation, and just made it summarize the land that God has given you. But in the Hebrew, Me'artzecha means your land. Asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach, which God gives you. So you think it's your land. but really it's God's land. And in those kind of, in that one phrase, it's conveying that whole message that don't ever think it's your land. Yes, you conquered it. God conquered it for you. Yes, you inhabited it. Hashem gave it to you. But it's not your land. It's the land that God gave you. And that mitzvah is about the recognition, and those kind of 5 words or 6 words are key to this mitzvah of Bikurim. So Rashi describes the process of setting aside first fruit. Man goes into his field. He finds, for example, a fig that has ripened, but it could be any of the 7 fruits, and he binds a piece of straw around it, so that he'll know this is the Bikurim, and he will then eventually put that in the basket and take it. The word for the straw that he binds, the little ribbon that he binds around it, is gemi. And that's a very interesting word, because there's an acronym for expression gedolim with the gimel, maaseh, the actions of Hashem, of God. So it's a recognition already when you put that ribbon on, that that's an interesting word, and white piece of straw, anything could have done, but using that gemi is already sending you a message. You have to acknowledge from the very beginning, this is the greatness of Hashem's actions. And you then go up to Jerusalem and you offer it, and it was a very public event, a very public ceremony which took place. It was brought in groups, people came together, and they arrived at the gates of Jerusalem. They decorated their baskets in magnificent ways. They had bands playing to accompany them, and the Jerusalemites would come out to greet them and walk with them to the temple. So it was a beautiful, triumphant celebration of the gift of the land and the recognition that we have to give Hashem thanksgiving and acknowledgement and recognition for having given it to us. At the same time, we're going to see the theme of humility coming through. Don't become so arrogant that you have built all this up on your own. Actually, this is a gift from the Almighty that has been given to you. And we find this, let's go back to the text. We come to the Kohen. The Kohen, incidentally, it says, that will be there in those days, by Yamim Hahem. And Rashi rightly says, well, which Kohen could you go to? One that lived in the previous generation or the next generation? And commentaries explain that this is actually part of the, it's not humiliation, that's the wrong word, part of the humbling yourself, rather. Part of the humbling of the self is you come, and you give it to whatever Kohen happens to be on duty at that particular moment when you walk into the Holy Temple. And you don't say something like, I'm going to stick around and I'm going to wait until perhaps, there's a Kohen that I feel more worthy of receiving my big gift. Part of the humility is you go to whoever happens to be at that particular moment in time, giving receiving the Bikurim, because as we'll see, you're not giving it to him. He's an agent of God, and so as an agent of Hashem, doesn't make a difference who the Kohen is. When it comes to the Birkat Kohanim in Shul, it's not the Kohanim blessing us; they're simply agents of Hashem, and the Kohen should never turn around and say, "Well, I don't think I'm worthy of giving the priestly blessing." He's just an agent to channel a blessing from Hashem to the people. Likewise here, he's just an agent to receive a gift to Hashem from them. And here he is, making it, telling the Kohen, "Here I am, and I have entered the land that Hashem gave our forefathers for us, and I acknowledge this." It then goes on to make a declaration. And as you can see, the Kohen takes the basket, places it before the altar, and that illustrates that he's just an agent of Hashem in this whole process. And then begins a declaration which is recited by the presenter of the Bikurim, and he says the following: the Anita ve'amarta. You then recite as follows, but the word the Anita is actually from the root, which you can see in the middle there, Ani, poor. So it's about not just making the statement, because the statement, I acknowledge God gave me something, give me said arrogantly, for yourself. No, humble yourself and say. We talk about the matzah, and we're going to come back to Pesach in a second. You can probably already see it staring at you in the face there. The quote from the Haggadah. We humble ourselves like the matzah, that is the lowly bread. And it's called at the beginning of the Haggadah lechem oni, lachma anya, the bread of the poor. So the part of the process of Pesach, which is a very similar theme, acknowledging the Exodus, acknowledging God made us into a nation, is about humbling yourself. And we find that similarly here in the statement that the person makes as they approach the temple and come in thanksgiving before Hashem, before the Kohen, which is why you're going to find quotes here from the Haggadah, or rather, shall I say, the Haggadah quotes from this particular text. And what do we do in the Haggadah? It says we start with Genai. We start before acknowledging Hashem's greatness to us talking about a humble origin. So what do we talk about here? We talk about Arami Ovedavi, how the Aramean, that's Lavan, subjugated our father. That's a reference, of course, to Yaakov, and there's it translated here. I don't know why I chose this translation. It's very not literate. My father was a fugitive Aramean. They went to Egypt, meager numbers, and then became a great and populous nation. But going back to humble origins of where we come from. In fact, in the Haggadah, we go even further back. We start with Terach. That's part of the process of this humbling of self, in order to be able to fully appreciate that it's not our own power, our own strength, and that it is Hashem who has blessed us. So we have to make mention of the humble origins, and let's go through the rest of the statement, which he makes there. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us, oppressed us, very much part of the Haggadah of Pesach. We cried out to Hashem. So all these verses have been adopted into the Haggadah, because of course they tell that story. We cried out to Hashem. I think I've got the same verse twice here. And Hashem took us out of Egypt with an outstretched hand, or Totu Moftim, with signs, and brought us to this land and gave us this land, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash. So we go through the history of humble origins, bringing us to Eretz Israel, and that's an important part of that Thanksgiving. And now I have brought the first fruit of the soul which you, Hashem, have given me, and you leave the basket there, bow before Hashem, and you leave. And that's the Bikurim ceremony. Now we're at the time of year. That's firsts. We are final days of the year, and then the beginning of the year. And what do we refer to the head of our year? Rosh Hashanah, we call it Rosh, the head. Why do we not simply call it the beginning of the year, Tchilat Hashanah? As we say in our prayers, Yom Tchilat Ma'asecha, it's the beginning of, Hashem's deeds. That's the day they created man. Why do we refer to it as Rosh? Rosh has a dimension of the head being the most important limb of the body. The controlling features reign in the brain, which control the entire functioning of the body. And what happens in the head has disproportionate effect in the rest of the body. So a headache is often a sign of disease elsewhere. An injury in the head is unbelievably, incomparably more serious than injury in any other limb in the body. And that's why the head of the year is called Rosh. And we have to treat the beginning of the year with the preciousness. This is one of the reasons why the mitzvah of Bikurim is kind of placed right here a couple of weeks before Rosh Hashanah. It's always the Shabbos before the Shabbat of Slichot. It's 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. We have Ki Tavo, then Nitzavim, and then it's Rosh Hashanah. That means it's only kind of not very far away, because it's on a Friday night. It's kind of the furthest that it can be, and the message is the importance of a beginning and the importance of the potential that is given to us. Research has been done about, it's interesting, they one of the metrics as to where the world is at is looking at Google searches. And looking at Google searches can give an indication of what people are looking for when they go onto the internet. What's the most researched word on January 1st in Google? Diet. Because people woke up with the resolution that next year is going to be altogether different, and so they're Googling diets. That's why you can't find parking in the gym for the first 2 weeks of January because of the good resolutions. Because it's certain, but the third week it's fine. You can find your space on the treadmill again. People are enthusiastic about beginnings, and we have to capitalize on that. It's an interesting dilemma. How do you capitalize on that? How do you make sure that the enthusiasm of the beginning of the year doesn't run away, and that you're not in a situation where, yes, there's plenty of place to park at the gym, third week in January. How do you make sure that it's lasting is a challenge? But that's the next step. But the first thing is to capitalize on the unbelievable energy and the gift that's given to us in the days that lie ahead, and the potential that Rosh Hashanah has within it, the head of the year has within it, and treat those days properly, just as you're careful, with your head. You go on a bicycle, you wear a helmet to protect your head. You don't necessarily cover every part of your body that way. That wouldn't be practical, but the head is treated in that special way. So here we are in that most precious time, and just as we discussed the dimensions of Bechor in the human dimension and the animals and in the realm of our possessions and financial achievements, there's also that dimension of Bechor, of that first in time. And we're about to enter that time. And we need to take it and sanctify it and maximize it and utilize it to the absolute best. So with that, I'm going to wish you Ketila Chatzima Tova. That's good, so last year before Yom Tov, but because it just is the right thing to do, being just a few weeks away. Have a wonderful evening.